welcome to episode 77 of the Give Me a Crown Knitting, Not Very Often Spinning and Bits and Pieces podcast. My name's Nina, also known as Give Me a Crown on Ravelry, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, and it's also the name of my Etsy shop where I sell project bags and various other little bits and pieces. It's been a very long gap between podcast episodes, which I'm very sorry about. Completely unintentional. I was a bit of a monogamous knitter there for a while I was working on the Speckle and Pop shawl, and then things just got in the way. It's been just a little bit crazy. Today I'm just trying to squeeze in a bit of time to do this podcast. I might get interrupted. I'm hoping I don't, because I really want to share with you what I've been working on recently, so hopefully it all pans out. Did I say that I'm coming to you from the central tablelands of New South Wales in Australia? And thank you very much for tuning in, whether you've been here before or whether you're new to the podcast. I look forward to sharing what I've been working on. Now, the first finished object, and I think it might be the only finished object, is my Speckle and Pop shawl, which is enormous. And you've probably seen this on lots and lots of podcasts by now. And I'm just trying to figure out which way is the right way. That's the wrong way. And it's huge. It goes from over here, it goes here, and over here. So I will pop a picture on screen of me attempting to model this wonderful shawl. This was my first ever mystery knit along, and it was something that I've been wanting to try out for a few years. I wasn't sure whether I'd like the process, and it was fun. And I think choosing the Stephen West one, knowing ahead of time how extravagant his mystery knit alongs can be, I knew what I was in for. I did have some troubles trying to figure out what yarns to use, and I think in the last episode I probably went over that a few times with all those sort of options that I had to play with, and I ended up changing my mind after all. This ended up being an all Australian shawl. So I'll start from this end. So this sort of greenish, yellowish colour is a Renanolly. I have some Miss Click Clack, which is this greyish speckle. And then this rusty colour is from Gradient Oz, who is now called by Bryony, I think. I will pop the name down below anyway so you can see. The pops that are in here, I had been hoping to use some speckles, but once I started on the first clue I realised that I really needed to use some solids to break up the pattern. So I ended up using some Miss Click Clacks, some Renanolly, and some Circus Tonic Handmade yarns in there. And I think when I first started it, I sort of decided that I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to see how it goes. If I don't like it, I can always rip back during sort of the first part of it. But once I started it, I started to see how things flow together, and I'm really happy with how well it's worked out. I had wanted to do a bit more of an extreme fade from one colour to the other. I had originally a much darker grey in mind, but I got a little bit scared. I thought that I should have them a little bit more cohesive. So even though these colours don't technically fade, I kind of think that they do. So I'm happy with the result, and I think this is going to be a fantastic shawl to wear around next winter. Waiting on the clues was fun, but some of the clues were enormous and some of them were smaller. So it sort of felt like I was chasing my own tail for a little bit on a couple of the clues, and I did fall behind. I think it was the third clue that I fell behind, but I managed to catch up pretty well for the final clue, and I think I finished a day late or something from the 4 weeks rather. It could have been 4 months, but it was 4 weeks of knit along. The final shawl weighs 340 grams, so that's actually pretty impressive for a 4-week stint of knitting, but I didn't get much other knitting done in that time. So I think if I'm going to do a mystery knit along again in the future, I'm definitely going to set aside the month and not do any other projects so that I don't feel sort of stressed out about my knitting, because nobody needs to feel stressed out about knitting. Seeing other people's shawls come together was a lot of fun. I was following along a little bit in the Stephen West official sort of threads, but they started to get very, very busy, and I was trying not to spoil the clues for myself as I was knitting along, so I'd sort of get a good sense of how the clue was going before I poked my nose in there, and by then there'd be lots of people who had already finished. But we had a good little cheer squad going on in the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group, and that was fun, just sort of having that sense of there's a few other people feeling the same way as I am about the big clues and pondering what we're doing. There were some helpful videos that were linked to from the pattern, but again, I didn't want to spoil the clues for myself, so I tried to sort of watch a little bit and then pause it and then do that bit and then watch the next bit. So I was never quite sure if I was pausing it at the right stage, if I was getting all the information. I made a couple of little boo-boos just with joining some I-cords on, and they're not visible in such an enormous shawl. I don't think anyone's going to ever notice what I did, and I can live with that. And there were a couple of sort of what seemed like errors, but by looking at the Ravelry groups, I was able to get that sense that other people were having the same sort of issues, and I was able to work around them. I was a little bit surprised by that, because the stitch counts were a little bit wonky, but by watching the videos I was able to see how it should be done, or at least it felt like it should be done, and it looked okay. And I think if you'd have followed the instructions it probably would have worked out anyway, but I was a little bit surprised that there was something that was where the stitch counts did seem to go off, but it can happen with patterns, but I wouldn't really want it to happen with a mystery knit along when you're not necessarily getting the feedback as quickly as you might want. But it seemed to work out, so that's okay. I'm not sure what else there is to say about it, but I love it, and I did do a big blocking out. It required a lot of space in order to block it out because it's so huge, but I had a lot of pins go in to get all my little edges for the points, and there's some brioche in there as well, but just with my colour choices it's not as visible, and I ended up running out of one of the yarns and I joined in the other, but all those sorts of little modifications were mentioned in the pattern, so that was fun. Would I do it again? Absolutely. I would do a Stephen West one again, because it was fun, but I would also do some other designers, but I think I would just probably want to see some of their previous mystery knit alongs beforehand, just to sort of make sure that it's the sort of thing that I want to do. But yeah, love it, love it, love it. No idea how to wear it, but it sort of drapes around in all sorts of craziness, and it's going to be the talk of the town, I'm sure. So for works in progress, I'm working on a featherweight cardigan by Hannah Fedig, and it's living in my little cat's bag that I made. I don't have any more of this cat fabric, unfortunately. I've had a few requests, but I'm going to try to get some more at some point, but there are I think there's some other cat bags in my shop at the moment. If there's not, there will be very soon. I've got some cat fabric on the cutting table at least. But I have been working on my cardigan, and this is being knit from Miss Click Clack's Shark Bay Lace in the Plum Bum colourway, and I have a body. I ended up extending the body length from the pattern. I can't remember now how much I actually extended it, but I did extend it because I wanted it to be a bit longer, and I extended the ribbing a little bit as well. I went down from a 4mm to a 3.5mm needle on the ribbing. It looks a little bit wobbly, and I think that's the lace weight yarn that's sort of causing that effect, but I think once it's had a bit of a block it'll be okay. The actual bind off, it suggested binding off in pattern, but I wanted to do a tubular bind off, and I'm not sure if it was the greatest option for lace weight yarn and for a silk merino blend. It's a 50-50 silk merino. It just looks a bit scraggly, a bit flary, and again, I think it's going to be okay once I give it a wash and a block. I think it'll be okay. Not that I'm going to block it too much, but just to sort of straighten it out when it gets a wash. I think hopefully it'll be okay. But lengthwise, I'm really happy with it, and I love the way that the colour is showing like that. It's just slightly shimmery and just beautiful, and feels so dreamy on. I've been working on the sleeve, and this sleeve has been causing me a little bit of grief. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll have seen a little bit about it, that I picked up the stitches for the sleeve with the same needle that I had for the body. But because the body is knit backwards and forwards and the sleeve is knit in the round, I just wasn't happy with the gauge that I was getting. My stitch gauge seemed okay, but my row gauge was just a little bit taller and the stitches were looking a little bit sloppy. So I ripped back. I tried to put it on metal DPNs. I think they were zings. The zings were too heavy for the lace weight yarn. It felt like I was going to start ripping my stitches out using that. And so then I tried some wooden DPNs that were 3.5mm. Wasn't happy with the stitch definition I was getting with that. Ripped back again, and I've gone back to magic loop. And I'm just not a fan of magic loop with the higher sharp cables on with lace weight yarn. It just feels like it's sort of battling against the yarn a little bit. So I think I need to invest in some higher sharp DPNs in different sizes, because I only have them for socks at the moment. Or else people have recommended some short circulars that I think they were 12-inch circulars. What I would do is I'd measure the sleeve and see what length of circular would work for that. But I'm pretty happy now with the gauge that I'm getting, and I think it's not going to be visible once it's had a bit of a block, that if the gauge changes it should be okay. But with the 4mm needle, it was definitely, the stitches were just looking longer, and when I put it on I could see the colour of my shirt underneath, whereas I couldn't on the body part. So it was just bothering me. So I think it's going to be okay. I've got a long way to go. I'm going to do the sleeves pretty long. I've still got lots and lots of yarn left. So there's the 2 balls. I'm definitely not going to run out of yarn. I haven't weighed... Oh, I did weigh. The body was 76 grams, and I've got 200 grams of yarn, so, or around 200 grams. So I'm not going to run out when I do the sleeves and the collar. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. I love it, love it, love it, love it, and I can't wait to wear it. It's going to be wonderful. I have also been working on my sock yarn blanket, which I will just get. So here's my sock yarn blanket, which is still growing, and I put in 3 squares, and the first one here is a mini from Smudged Yarns. So they were the speckled minis that I was hoping to put into my Speckle and Pop shawl, but I realised that they were too speckly, but they're absolutely gorgeous, and I loved working with this yarn. So I'll be putting more of those in here, but also thinking about saving them for some other projects. I have some Miss Click Clack Houston We Have a Problem, which I used in my Speckle and Pop shawl. And then I have some Ren and Ollie Juicy, which I love that orange. It's absolutely, it's vibrant and crazy and wild, and I think I need more of that juicy colour or something. She has some beautiful, just incredibly saturated, strong colours. Love that. So got a bit more of a row to go, and then again I will be pondering how big to make my blanket. I was also doing some travel, so I started a sock, and wow, that yellow is really bright. It's not quite as bright in person. It's coming up very fluoro on screen, but it's a little bit less bright than that, but it is a bright yellow. So this is some Knit Picks yarn. I have Knit Picks Stroll in the Dandelion colourway for the toe, and then I have Knit Picks Felici in the Chickadee colourway for the leg. I got these yarns from Santa last year, so I thought it was time to put this yarn on my needles and make myself a pair of socks. I decided to do toe up just because I was going to be travelling and I wanted to do some stockinette knitting, and also because I want to use up as much of the Felice yarn as possible and make long socks. I did, is it Judy's Magic Cast On for the toe, did some increases, and I've written those up in my project page on Ravelry, I'm pretty sure. And I'm using 2.25mm high sharps with a 64 stitch count, I think, which is a bit larger than I normally do. I used to do a lot of foot hugging socks, but I decided to do just a little bit bigger, just to have a different kind of pair of socks in my sock drawer. And I started knitting and knitting and knitting, and then I got quite far into the foot before I'd even started travelling. And so then I had to think a little bit about where I was going to pop the heel. I did some measurements off some of my old socks to see where I could put the Afterthought heel yarn in, and I actually ended up then putting the heel in once I got home from my travels, because I just wanted to double check that it was actually fitting okay, and it was. One thing you'll note here is that I've got a thin stripe of grey before these sort of fuller stripes happen, and I thought about trying to figure out where to start on a full stripe when I started the Felice yarn, but the colour difference between these two was so similar that I couldn't quite figure out where the colour changed, and I probably should have taken it out in daylight or started off with this sort of browny grey colour, and then I could have started with a full stripe, but I don't think it's really going to matter. I've got that much yarn left, so still probably half of the 50-gram ball, so they're going to become fairly long, and now I'll start sort of measuring when I need to do some increases for my calf. And then for the second sock, I'm going to do it toe up as well, but I'm going to take the yarn from the outside of the ball rather than the inside of the ball, so that my stripes are going to go in different directions. So that little funny bit down here, I don't think it's going to be too much of a sort of issue, because the reason I wanted to try to start at a colour join was so that I would have matching socks, but I won't. I will have two opposite socks, I guess, but that's okay. I think they're going to be fun socks, and they have the brown in them, which is browns and greys, which are my favourite colours, so they're going to be awesome. And I'm losing my voice. I've had a bit of a coldy, flu-y thing going on because the weather here has been a little bit crazy. But yes, socks. I have another pair of socks on the go, which I shared a little sneak peek of on Instagram, but I won't show here because it is one of my new designs. But I'm knitting it from this wonderful yarn, which is from Circus Tonic Handmade, and it's the Major Mitchell Cockatoo colourway. It's a gorgeous pinky colour, and I will hopefully have those socks ready for testers, I would say at the rate that I'm going, after Christmas, so that everyone's got their Christmas knitting out of the way, and then they'll be nice socks for the new year. I also have another project on the needles, which I'm just going to get. I went to Canberra recently to visit with my brother and his family, and one of my nieces gave me this picture of a tortoise. Not a turtle, it's a tortoise, because it has legs rather than flippers. And she wants me to make her a tortoise. I have made my nieces various toys in the past, so they're pretty good at making drawings for me and asking me to make them. I have strict instructions to go for a lighter green rather than the darker green on the legs. It has to have a white bit around underneath the shell, brown shell, green head, white toenails. It's going to have a yellow belly with some dark stripes. So I've been going through my stash and having a bit of a look. And normally I crochet these types of toys, but I decided to make it hard for myself and try to knit this one. And it's going to be very hard to show because it's just the edge of the shell at the moment. And I'm just trying to figure out how to do some three-dimensional knitting. This is curling up at the moment, but I think it'll be okay once it all sort of comes together. So it's going to have the bit for the neck, and the head's going to come out from here, and then the tail's going to be out the back, I think it's going to have a tail. The picture doesn't have a tail on it, but I think I'm going to put a tail on the tortoise. Although I might need to check whether tortoises have tails. I'm sure they do. Sure. I'll check. So I'm just at the point of curving up the shell. I'll do some kind of stripy things on there to mimic the I don't know my tortoise anatomy, but are they scales? No, surely they're not scales. Don't know what they are. But anyway, the little lumpy bits of the tortoise shell, because I thought about doing colour work and then that sort of just blew my mind. So I'm going to add it on afterwards, but I'm going to try to get this done in the next week or so that I can get it off to the niece so that she gets to enjoy her tortoise for the holidays. So I'm just using some Four Seasons yarn from Spotlight. They're pure wool DK weight yarns and they work up well for toys. The toys can end up going in the washing machine and they seem to come out okay. And I'm really losing my voice today. Okay, we'll see if my voice can hold out for just a little bit longer. I've also had some acquisitions. So I did a swap with Tristan from the Girls in the Yarn Cafe podcast, and she is the dyer behind Dragon Horde Yarns, and I received these two gorgeous skeins of yarn. So this has got my hair on it. I've obviously been cuddling up to it. This is her fluffy sock base. It's a fingering weight, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, 462 yards and 100 grams in the Trelawney colourway. And there are some gorgeous, gorgeous colours going through there, pinks and greens and blues and oranges. And super, super soft, very squishy. Not too sure what I'm going to make with it yet. It's kind of calling shawl to me. And I could pair it up with a grey, perhaps, and come up with something amazing. And the second one is on her Dragon Scales base. It's a fingering weight high twist, 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, 436 yards, 100 grams in the Molly Weasley colourway. And this has got lots and lots of speckles, oranges and greens and reds and blues, and then there's browns in there. I love my browns, and it is also squishy. I think the fluffy sock base feels squishier. This I think is a little bit with a higher twist, but it's still super squishy. So I think probably socks from this one and shawl from this one. But now that I've shown them to you, I can skein them up, or ball them up rather, from the skeins and start working on them soon. I also picked up some Chiagu red lace needles. These are on my secret socks, so I can't show them to you at the moment, but I found out that one of the local towns to me called Blaney, which is about 15 minutes drive away, there's a fabric shop there which also sells yarn, and they've been open since April, but somehow, even though they're on the main road, I completely missed them. So they're called Blaney Sew and More, and they had the Chiagu red lace, but they only had some sizes, and then they had some short circulars, but I can't even remember. It's now a couple of months since I bumped into it, and I've been back a couple of times, but I've only been picking up fabric. So they had a whole range of Knit Picks needles, and they had lots of yarn from all sorts of places that I've never heard of. They had sock yarns, so I do need to go back there and have a proper browse around, but I just don't need a lot of yarn at the moment. I'm trying to work through my stash, so I'm trying not to get too distracted by that. But these are working pretty well so far. I'll give a better report on them once I've worked on my sock a bit more. In Canberra, I went to the Wool Shed at Manuka, which is a small yarn shop, and they had lots of nice yarns. They had bunches of needles, they had circular needle sets, but not quite the sizes that I was after. They had a great selection of books, and they had pom-pom magazines, and they had interpretations but for those sorts of magazines and books, I feel like I need to look at the patterns on offer a bit more on Ravelry first before I buy the book itself, because I'm not sure if they've got enough patterns in there for me to warrant buying the entire book. But it was nice to know that they have pom-pom, so that if there's an issue at some point where I want to get the whole issue, then I can definitely get it from there. But I didn't pick up any yarn. I was with my mum and she picked up a couple of crochet hooks. They had the ergonomic, I think they were clover crochet hooks, so she was happy to find those. But then I also went to the wool room in Young on the way home, and they were even smaller with their yarn selection, but they had some nice looking yarns. They also had buttons. They had some patterns, but mainly sort of singular patterns rather than books. But they had a nice little selection, so if you're ever going through Young, check out the wool room in Young. I picked up this yarn. They had this Wendy Happy 4-ply yarn. It's a 75% bamboo, 25% nylon yarn. And the reason I picked it up was because it was 75% bamboo and 25% nylon. And I've never tried that that combination before, so it's going to be interesting to see how it works up into socks. I'm guessing this is variegated rather than self-striping, but I shall find out once I start working with it. And they only had this in two colours. They had a pinky colour and then this blue. I asked my mum which one she would like socks from, and she said blue, which is not surprising because she loves her blues. So I don't think I'm going to get these done in time for Christmas, but she's already got some blue socks knit up so that she doesn't know about. So she'll definitely be getting blue socks, and then I'll try to get these done for her before she goes on her next adventures. I think it's just going to be a pair of shorty socks, so for summertime I don't think a bamboo nylon combination would make for long socks, because I imagine they would just fall down, but who knows, I might be wrong. So I think that's all the acquisitions that I've had, and I'm kind of speeding through this because I think I am going to get interrupted very, very soon, and the sunlight is going in and out and it's getting very atmospheric in here. I'm sorry if I've been going a million miles an hour. I just really wanted to get an episode out because I have been feeling very guilty that I haven't been chatting to you as much lately. But I have been on Instagram, so if you don't hear from me on YouTube, then check out Instagram, and I love chatting with people on posts and all that kind of fun stuff. But for normal everyday life sort of things, it has been chaotic. My mum has come back from some travels over in Western Australia, so I've been catching up with her a lot, which has been a lot of fun. We went to a country show in Carcoar down the road, where we saw some sheep trials and whip cracking and various things, and checked out the local sort of handcrafts that were being exhibited. It's a very small show, but it was fun to see, and it gave me some ideas that if I'm living here next year, then I really should enter some of my handcrafts in there. There were socks and shawls and hand spun goods and various things that had won prizes. The prizes are about $5. I think entry is $1 or something, so it's not like it's a big monetary reward, but I think it would be kind of special to get a couple of little certificates saying that I won a prize if I won. So I might give that a whirl next year. I also went to the garage sale trails that they had here back in, I think it was October. Went to a few of the local garage sales and picked up a rhubarb plant, which has been going really, really well. It was just from the next little village over and from their own little garden patch, so I figured that it's a good way to try something that's sort of been growing locally, because it should be used to the climate, and it's been going great. I've actually harvested a couple of stalks of rhubarb and made a sort of a rhubarb sugar combination syrupy thing, which I had with some natural yogurt. Tasted amazing, and I now am waiting for more rhubarb. There were also some local markets where there was, from another local village, a guy was selling lots and lots of seedling sort of things from various vegetables. So I picked up some squash, some kind of pumpkin, which I can't remember which kind of pumpkin it was, and some corn, cucumber. The cucumber unfortunately didn't make it. It sort of shriveled up and died, but the squash has already been growing squash, so I had a couple of little squashes, and there's some more squashes ready for picking. And The pumpkins haven't turned up yet. The corn looks like it's actually going to make some corn pretty soon, and yeah, they're sort of overall they're growing pretty well, and my own little plantings seem to be going okay, apart from my strawberries, which produced a couple of strawberries and then hasn't flowered since. So not too sure how to get my strawberries to flower, but I've got to Google that and see what I can do. It's probably lacking some nutrients or something. So that was my little gardening update. I also, when I went to Canberra, I went and renewed my passport. Went to the consulate of Finland, and they gave me a few little gifts, which was very, very nice, and got my passport application in, and it should be arriving any day now, which I can't wait, because I haven't had a valid passport for, I think it's been 1.5 years now, so I've basically been stuck in the country, can't leave, can't do anything, so I'm looking forward to getting that, and then I'm very much itching to plan a trip to Finland. So it will happen next year, just not sure exactly when yet. I have been looking at flights for January. I might be a little bit soon, but it's more likely to be the middle of the year or the end of the year, depending on whether I want to see snow or whether I want to see the summertime, because I haven't seen the Finnish summertime since I was a little kid. So all my other travels to Finland have been during the wintertime, which I love, but summertime packing would be a lot easier and I could fit a lot more yarn on the way home. So we'll see. I have still been trying to learn Swedish. I have been watching SBS On Demand, which provides access to a lot of foreign language programs. So I've been watching Arnedal, which is a Swedish crime drama, which is a little bit weird. It's a bit gruesome, a bit weird. The story plot lines, I don't know, a little bit, it's sort of a series, and then all sorts of things happen ridiculously fast in relationships. So there's drama and there's romance and then there's crime, and I don't know, it's bizarre, but it's been actually fun to watch. I've got through the first season onto the second, where I was disappointed that some of the characters are no longer there, but I've started watching it and enjoying it, and it's definitely helping tune my ear to Swedish, but I've still got a very long way to go. I think that's pretty much it. I've been working on some new designs. I've been working on making project bags and all sorts of things for my Etsy shop. Summer is trying to turn up, but it's kind of not, in that it's been raining a lot and then it's been cold. Still had the heater on in December, which is just unheard of, but it looks like we're now going to get a proper sunny patch here in my little village, so that's a good thing. I have been rambling, so I think I'm going to wrap up so that I can get this finished before I get interrupted. But thank you very much for bearing with me for not podcasting for so long. If you have any questions about anything that I've been making, because I did go feel free to put a comment on YouTube and I will get back to you, or pop by the Ravelry group that you could find by searching for Give Me a Crown on Ravelry. I hope that you're well and making lots of fun things. You're not getting too stressed in the lead up to the holidays. I'm definitely not. I'm trying to get this tortoise done. If it doesn't get done for the Christmas, then that's okay. I'm sure that my niece will forgive me. But I think apart from that, I'm not going to try to do anything else too crafty for the holidays. It'll be a bit of a low-key one here, but I'll hopefully podcast before then. So yes, I hope that you're enjoying the time that you're having with your crafts, and looking forward to a bit of time putting your feet up, hopefully. And I'll see you soon.